Well, apologise for that. I've gone all stuttery again. I'm being shown I have an unstable connection. I'm plugged into the Ethernet, so quite how that can be, I don't know. But anyway, here I am, Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. It's ELEVENSES, show number 568 on Tuesday, the 30th of September. So we're a day earlier than normal. Packed show for you again. Every time I think I'm not going to have much to say, stories suddenly appear. The first one is that KTM's new owners, Bajaj, are arguing that the Austrian company should be shifting their production to, guess where, India. Action is being considered against excessive Box Hill road noise. Stafford Classic Show, that will round out the season. A pair of Joey Dunlop's race-winning machines are going under the hammer at that classic machine show, by the way. Marc Marquez, he completes a comeback MotoGP title win. Fairly remarkable, in fact, I think. Damon's vapourware has hardened. It's become clay. And we'll have a look at TVS. They've acquired the Italian Design and Technology Centre. We'll see what that means for Norton. Will the XYTE electric three-wheeler actually do what it says on the box? I have my doubts. And BMW's cryptic 1+309 message is revealed as an India-only limited edition 310RR. And finally, bizarre story suggests that Yamaha have patented a sort of a piston, not an engine, just sort of a piston to give e-motos some character. I think the report's got the wrong end of the stick, personally. Anyway, we'll have a look at the in-depth story. Talking of piston engines, how much power do we actually need? So settle yourselves down, grab yourself a brew and a biscuit, and stay with me for the next 40 odd minutes as I run through all the topics today. Right, okay, so what do I want to talk about today? Well, let's just start with a bit of news about a book I'm working on. Now, I haven't got a title for this yet. I'm still working on the final proof. And it's going to be the first of three. Now, why do I need to write three more books? Well, simple. Each one looks at one of the three standard crash types. Now, back in November 2022, senior safety consultant Malcolm Palmer, he works for the TRL, Transport Research Laboratory, he wrote a blog item he called The Predictable Nature of Motorcycle Collisions. Now, Malc, I happen to know well. I've worked with him for a number of years in sort of exchanging ideas on rider training, and I know that he was personally a trainer for many years too, and he wrote a quick look at motorcycle crash stats through the ages shows that riders typically experience the same few main crash types now as they did then. Now, this is actually something I've been saying for quite a long time. It's something that Duncan McKillop has also pointed out, but Melt pointed to an example. He used a 2004 Department for Transport report that took data from Midlands police forces, and he said the report highlighted three types of crash that riders were most likely to be involved in: right-of-way violations, what we call the Smidsley crash, bends, and overtaking. And the report found that the majority, 70% plus, of the motorcycle accidents investigated were covered by those scenarios. Now, we also commented on an unpublished report that looked at 4 rider training courses, which noted, quote, inconsistencies in the way in which the rider training courses introduced and covered these main crash types. It also concluded that such scenarios, if they were to be covered in training in a way that could influence rider behavior, should be accompanied by practical approaches to cover spotting such risks early and the steps that riders should take to avoid them. Now, that really underpins my own approach to rider training. TRL haven't come down and asked me to see what I do, but my school wasn't called Survival Skills by accident. It was built on my own riding experience for surviving 16 years in the sort of school of hard knocks as a motorcycle courier, and I've focused both in my training and in my writing on precisely these 3 crash types: the SMIDSI, the cornering spill, and the overtaking crash. I've written about these three crashes since the mid-90s when I first put sort of finger to PC keyboard, written dozens of articles on each crash type. I've covered them indirectly in other written projects. For example, the Science of Being Seen project looks in depth at the causes of the SMIDSI, but it doesn't go into great detail about how riders can spot the crash coming up and what they can do if it starts to develop. So the aim of these three books is to go off in that slightly different direction, but aim to offer readers a consistent research and science-based investigation into these collisions and crashes and why they happen, some practical ways of identifying the danger areas and to reduce the risk, and then some effective steps that we can use to avoid and evade the crash itself if the situation goes bad on us. Now, I had hoped to get the first book finished by the end of July, but and be well on the way with the second project. I'd hope to get all three out by Christmas, actually, but as usual, time has slipped away. And the book on the SMIDSI Junction crash should be out in the next couple of weeks, certainly before the end of October. So why am I letting you know now if you can't buy it yet? Well, the answer is simple. If you've got any SMIDSI tales that you would like to include in the book, I'm always interested in the sort of the insider view of things go wrong. We hear so much about sort of the top-down post-crash analysis, but relatively little from the people who actually experience crashes. So if you've got any tales, let me know. Something a little bit more in depth than the driver didn't look properly, though, would be nice. And maybe you've got a snappy title for the series of 3 books too. I'm open to suggestions. Right. Okay. So if you do enjoy having your thinking challenged rather more than normal, but if you want your learning to be interactive, I've made a little bit of a change to the survival skills equals. Rather than try to run them on a monthly basis, the idea was to keep everybody in step and working together. I found that that's been a little bit tricky. People have worked at their own pace and they've got out of step. So now on, I'll be running courses at intervals and you can join whenever you want. Now, obviously, an e-course won't suit everybody, but if you do want your thinking to be challenged, I think you'll be surprised at just how effective these are. So if you want to sign up, head over to my sum up page and you'll find the e-course over there. I do have a QR code, so I seem to have lost that for the moment. Anyway, right, let's move on to the weather. Now, it's going to be an interesting few days coming up, actually. Now, there will be a split in conditions between the northwest and the southeast, initially at least. That will sort of fizzle out later on in the week, and it will be more widely wet and windy starting to affect the UK from late on Thursday and into the start of next weekend. Now, there are two hurricanes, actually. There's still hurricanes at the moment in the Atlantic, and they will be tracking across the big pond in our direction. And they will fizzle out, of course, as they get closer to us. The doom and gloom merchants are already predicting wet and wild weather due to the influence of these systems for the weekend. But in fact, they'll still be out somewhere in the Atlantic. They're not going to be that close. But they could have some impact in steering other weather systems our way. Anyway, for today, Tuesday, it will start cloudy with patchy rain in the north, turning heavy across Northern Ireland and Western Scotland by evening. Here in the south and more easterly areas, it will be dry, it will be warm, sunny spells, variable cloud temperatures into the high teens or low 20s. It's a lovely day here in London at the moment. Wednesday will remain cloudy and breezy in the north with showers, some longer spells of rain again for Northern Ireland and parts of northwest England. And rain will turn persistent and heavy across the west of Scotland. And there's a yellow rain warning in force from Wednesday evening to Friday morning, incidentally. Southern areas will stay drier, variable clouds and some sunny spells and still fairly mild. Now, more heavy rain will spread into northern western areas on Thursday. But in the southeast, it will again stay dry with some bright spells. Now, Friday and into Saturday, this is where the potential change in the weather comes, and it could bring some wet and very windy conditions through much of the UK, although there is a lot of uncertainty at this distance. So, as usual, the advice is check your forecast. Right. Okay, and on to some bike news. Now, if you've followed the saga of KTM's financial collapse and rescue, you'll know that the Austrian manufacturer has only been able to sort of stagger through the summer, basically, thanks to the selling out their majority shareholding to the Indian manufacturer Bajaj Auto. Now, Bajaj stepped in with a large debt funding package and they rescued the company, but also took a controlling stake in Pierer Bajaj AG. That's the structure that owns KTM and Husqvarna and GasGas. Now, production at KTM's Batikhofen plant in Austria has restarted, but it's at much lower capacity than previously. It's only building a limited range of models at the moment, as KTM are still attempting to get rid of some of the massive overstock of unsold bikes they accumulated, 20,000 of them, 2 years production. And on top of that, they have had issues with the local supply chain. Parts manufacturers apparently have been reluctant to resume supplying KTM after getting their fingers well and truly burned with that 30% debt settlement that you may recall. It may have saved KTM, but it forced some suppliers into bankruptcy. Now, not entirely unsurprisingly, with such a big stake in KTM, Bajaj's Auto's Rajiv Bajaj has been making some statements, and I doubt they'll come as entirely welcome news to KTM's existing management. Now, in an interview on an Indian TV channel, the managing director of Bajaj recently stated that European manufacturing is dead. Now, he's implying that the cost of in Europe is no longer viable for mass premium motorcycle production. He points out that the smaller capacity KTMs that are manufactured and exported out of India are actually delivering much higher profit margins. In effect, he says that the brand should be Austrian name only and should follow the lead of Triumph in moving production to Asia. Though when he claimed that every single Triumph motorcycle that's made today is made either in Thailand or more recently India, he wasn't entirely correct, because the Hinckley facility still does make bikes. It focuses on assembling high-end and special edition models, including Triumph Factory Customs, and the Speed Triple 1200 RR and the Tiger 1200 range are both built in England. But if you own one of the middleweight models, the 660 triples, for example, any of the sort of twin cylinder range, if you think your bike is built in England, think again. Everything else is being built in factories in Thailand and Brazil, and the baby 400 Triumphs, of course, are built in India by Bajaj themselves. So Bajaj argues that KTM should be focusing its energies on the brand and what it produces rather than the wear of where it's made. And he says, while it may appear that the motorcycle is a motorcycle, there are two worlds of motorcycles out there. He explained. There's one world of volume brands such as Honda, Yamaha, Royal Enfield, TVS, Bajaj, and then there's the more premium, more lifestyle space dominated by Western brands such as KTM, Triumph, Ducati, BMW, Harley. And he went on to say these are very different business models. Obviously, because the scale is very different, the levers of brand, quality, technology, cost, and distribution work very differently. And he said scale's not the most important thing for KTM. The quality metrics are more important here, which might be a reference to KTM's well-known reliability issues. And he said that the roadmap for moving forward begins with restoring the brand, then resetting the cost. So that may not mean cheaper KTMs, but it may mean if by shifting the supply chain to India, that the bikes are actually cheaper to build and resulting in a more profitable company. He also hinted that the model range could be pared back. He said, as unfortunately sometimes happens with success, you tend to diffuse the brand by expanding it into too many categories, too many segments, shaking off the complexity caused by too many products. So does that mean fewer models in the KTM range? Does it mean KTM divesting itself of GasGas and Husqvarna? Who knows? The only certainty is that KTM may be back, but they're certainly far from the carefree days of just a couple of years ago. Right, moving on. You may recall that Surrey Police recently launched an operation in which they stopped what they said were hundreds of noisy bikes. Now, a Surrey Parish Council's launched a petition to canvass local support for a public space protection order and also for the installation of an acoustic camera. And this is all in the village of Mickleham, which of course is near Box Hill, if you know the area. The village is said to be plagued by nuisance road noise, and the blame is being placed firmly at the doors of Rikers Cafe. Mickleham Parish Council, they said that the extended opening hours of this local biker cafe have been causing these intolerable noise levels, and the petition has so far reached 1,300 signatures. And they're asking Mole Valley District Council to set in. The District Council says that they are considering the PSPO and they're due to hold a public consultation into the issues, which would include a possibility of a 3-month trial of an acoustic camera. Will Dennis, he's the Parish Council Chair, he said bikers have been coming to Rikers for years and nobody has a problem with that. But when new management extended the opening hours to 9 p.m. a few years ago, it brought a new cohort of younger riders who rev their bikes and pop their exhausts. But of course, some riders are blaming custom car drivers who go to Rikers too. One said they make this really loud back-popping noise on the exhaust. Now, in case you're wondering, a public spaces protection order is a legal power under the Anti-Social Behaviour Crime and Policing Act of 2014, and it allows local councils with police support to impose restrictions on behaviour in a defined area if that behaviour has, quote, a detrimental effect on the quality of life for people nearby. Once in force, then police and council enforcement officers, so it doesn't have to be the police, they can issue penalties if people don't stop the behaviour that the order is aimed at preventing. Now, Rikers claims to be Britain's oldest biker cafe, but to my knowledge, they've not yet commented on the issue. Right, little break. As always, can I ask you to take a moment to like and subscribe to the show if you've not already done so? Every click helps other motorcyclists discover my content, or simply share the word the old-fashioned way by telling your riding buddies about Elevenses. They can watch on catch-up. Remember, my latest riding skills articles are always free, and you can get all links delivered weekly to your email inbox by subscribing to my newsletter at survivalskills.substack.com. Or you can use this QR code to jump straight to it. When the show's over, of course. No spam, and if you don't like the content, unsubscribe at any time. Right, okay, a couple of comments. We have Sue looked in and we've had Clive looking in. Good morning to you both. Nice to see you. Hope you're enjoying the weather if you're in one of the parts where the sun's shining. Right, okay, so let's move on then. Now, if you do fancy taking a punt on the weather staying fine for the weekend of October the 11th and 12th, so a little while away yet, it's the Classic Motorcycle Mechanics Show, sponsored by Carol Nash at the Stafford County Showground. Now, the show's been running since the 1980s, and it closes out the season with the usual wide range of events and activities, including a massive auto jumble, they say, and the Bonhams auction. More on that in a moment. On the Sunday, the Bold Dog FMX team will quote, wow crowds with gravity-defying stunts soaring 35 feet into the air from the world's largest mobile landing system. And there's a wall of death too, if that's not enough. Racing legends Wayne Gardner and Roger Marshall will also be live on stage. And Wayne Gardner's certainly an engaging talker, and I've met Roger Marshall once, and he's very nice to talk to too. And they'll be sharing tales from their racing career in motorcycling. Said to be something for everyone. 20% saving on booking tickets if you do it in advance at £16.50 for adults, and children, young adults under 16 actually go free when accompanied by an adult. So if you want a ticket, this is the link going up. He says, hopefully. There it is. That's gone up right. Okay, and so what was the special feature about the Bonhams bikes? Well, let's get the right photo up. There it is. Now, I mentioned the auction, and going under the hammer on the Sunday, the 12th, are two of Joey Dunlop's machines. This is the 1988 TT winning Formula 1 RC30. It was also used for a win in the senior TT that year. And the second bike is his 1999 Ulster GP winning RC45. So that'll be the RC30 on the right and the RC45 on the left, both absolutely stunningly beautiful machines. Now, the two bikes are apparently on display at Joey's Bar in Ballymoney, and both are on offer with an estimate set at between £80,000 and £100,000 each. There are actually 200 plus motorcycles on sale, 60 of which will be sold with no reserve. Now, staying with racing for the moment, Marc Marquez tied up his 7th MotoGP World Championship at the Japanese Grand Prix on Sunday with a second place behind his teammate Francesco Bagnaia. It is one of the great career comebacks of all times, although I'll be honest, I've never particularly been a Marquez fan. Some of his riding early on in his career was definitely questionable. But it is his first MotoGP title since 2019. It's 6 years after he suffered more than 100 crashes in those intervening seasons, and he's also had to undergo 4 operations, so it's quite the comeback. It's actually Marquez's 9th title in Grand Prix motorcycle racing, because there are 2 in the lower classes too. But it seems no new owners of the series, Liberty Media, don't want to count anything other than top class races for their new Hall of Fame, which they just launched a few weeks ago. Very American concept, a Hall of Fame. Right, okay, so another quick break. If you enjoy these shows, why not become a member of my Coffee pages? Just follow the QR code and sign up. As a member, you get free access to the latest articles and the Survival Skills ebook shop. Instant downloads of everything from free mini ebooks to ebook versions of my paperbacks. Become a one-off supporter and you'll open up the archive of over 1,000 articles. If you buy me a monthly cuppa as a subscriber, there's even more content to enjoy. Right, okay, so on to the latest bit of news. Now, I talked about the state of the electric motorcycle industry in a special just a couple of 11s back, and I mentioned the US electric bike manufacturer Damon. They've become something of a poster child for vapourware. Now, it's a term borrowed from the computer software industry. I'm sure you know this much anticipated piece of software that gets regular progress look-ins, but in the final event, it never actually appeared. And certainly that's been the state of play for Damon. They've been talking about their bikes since the company was founded. That was back in about 2019, I think. They promised electric super bikes with high spec. They actually promised a 200 horsepower, 200-mile range bike with top speed of 200 miles per hour, the magic 200s. Of course, nothing has been seen. They frequently showcase prototypes. They have run pre-order programs and reservations, and they claim that thousands of bikes have been ordered, but as yet, not a single production machine has been delivered to customers. Their planned production facility in Vancouver was scrapped. This was set to be moved to California, but it appears that that new production plant has also been delayed. So don't expect me to get very excited that the company has now completed a full-scale clay model of their bike, something that they say is a critical phase in the machine's development, moving the hypersport race from a digital concept to a physical form. And they say the next step is to begin testing a prototype on track for technology validation. Well, that's 6 years after they started. Hardening up vapor to clay is still a very long way from delivering a customer machine. We're also waiting on solid news of the 4 machines that Norton will be launching in November. There are plenty of rumours, but nothing concrete there either. But the parent company, TVS Motor, they have just announced the establishment of a global centre of excellence for design and engineering. This is in Bologna, in Italy, and it follows the acquisition of the Engines Engineering SPA, an Italian firm, which has been using its expertise in high-performance motorcycle design for various companies around the world, and is also involved in MotoGP design. Now, the new centre apparently aims to serve as what they are terming a concept to production innovation hub, integrating engines engineering advanced prototyping capabilities with TVS Motors' global R&D resources. And the collaboration is expected to accelerate product development, enhance design differentiation, strengthen technological leadership across TVS's mobility platforms. And Chairman Sudhashar Venu, who's emphasized that this initiative will bolster Norton Motorcycles' capabilities, and it will enable the brand to craft exceptional high-performance motorcycles that honor its iconic legacy whilst elevating future ambitions. All very soundbitey, isn't it? But what does this actually mean for Norton's UK base? Now, you may recall Norton Motorcycles received that 8.5 million in government funding not too long ago to support the development of electric motorcycles at its Solihull facility. The project, named Zero Emission Norton, was also aimed at producing high-performance, long-range motorcycles. But I've not seen any updates on that particular project in quite a while, and presumably this means that the R&D on their petrol engine bikes is also likely to be shifted away from the UK. Right. That's two wheels. What about three? And if I get the right picture up, there we go. Three wheels look to be back in vogue. Now, I've recently reported on a number of three-wheelers in these shows, some of which involve complications like leading bodies, and this is the latest. It's called the XYTE 1. A product of the Munich-based XYTE mobility company. I had to work out how to pronounce that, of course, because it's actually spelt XYTE, but obviously XYTE is how it's supposed to be pronounced. The model was due to be revealed earlier this month. It's said to put rider safety front and center, and hopefully behind as well, by targeting urban commuters who want the agility of a scooter without compromising on protection or comfort. Quote, weave your way through city traffic and park with ease. Let's give you a bit of a zoom in picture of that. So the website says you can ride without a helmet, well protected in almost any weather, for everyone with a car license. Now, the vehicle integrates a safety cell, and so the riders or drivers, whatever you like to call them, can legally operate the vehicle without a helmet using a standard European Class B car license. XYTE claims it makes this the world's safest electric scooter and combines the accessibility of a two-wheeler with the protection of a small car. Now, it is fully electric, of course. It has a 100-kilometer plus range on a single charge, whilst top speed is capped at 100 kilometers per hour, though presumably you won't get both at the same time. The battery is a 7.6 kilowatt affair, which takes just over 2 hours to charge from 20 to 80% on a household outlet, but there's no word on whether it can use street side chargers. The motor puts out 19 kilowatt, and the vehicle, to me, it looks not like the new category of vehicle that XYTE are claiming. It looks like a bit like the sort of the offspring of BMW's two-wheeler scooter that you may recall from some years back, and the sort of the Renault Twizy four-wheel microcar, which you see around occasionally. Price. Introductory offer, €10,750 plus VAT, which works out at just about £11,100, including the sales tax in the UK. You can claim the first off the production line. You can pre-order them with a deposit of €250, which will arrive in selected cities early next year. But London's not one of them, by the way, and that may be because UK road rules do actually require you to wear a helmet on something like this. If it'll be classed, I'm not sure how it'll be classed actually, but it's an interesting point. But I think a helmet will still be required in the UK. But it also has a 4-point harness, which I believe is legal for use in the UK. So will it actually excite anyone? My fear is it'll end up being a 2005 version of the Sinclair C5. Right, okay, moving on. You may remember that on the last show, I showed you this particular lights out, stay tuned graphic from Instagram, which had a sort of cryptic, are you 1 in 310 message. Now, it appears that the message is to sell, to celebrate rather the sale of the 10,000th G310RR motorcycle. And to do that, here's the bike which is appearing. It's a limited edition G310RR. And there will, of course, as you probably figured out, be 310 of them, and it will feature distinctive 1 of 310 badging, and it's said to signal the highly exclusive nature of this limited edition. It will be available in 2 color options, a cosmic black and a polar white. I'm not sure whether either of these is the this particular machine, but anyway, don't bother looking for them in your local showroom because they will be exclusive to India. Now, just to round off the weirdness for the week, this is a patent which has been doing the rounds. I've seen it on 2 websites. It's for a saddle riding type electric vehicle, which is for as a motorcycle to you and me, and it's from Yamaha. Now, how it's been interpreted by some online magazines is quite interesting, because what they've been saying is that Yamaha have developed a something that looks like an engine that simply pumps air around to give the look and feel of a piston engine, and they say this is going to be fitted to an electric motorcycle to give it some character. That's the explanation anyway. I'm not so sure, because the diagrams here, if you look at them, they clearly show the thing has a spark plug in the top. Why would you need a spark plug if it's not actually a petrol engine? It wouldn't do anything if all that's happening is the thing's pumping air around. And again, if you look at the bike here, there appears to be some kind of fuel injection system, carburetor or something of that sort. Throttle body at the back of the engine, and look again, and at the front of the engine here you'll see there is an exhaust system disappearing. You can just see it behind the rear wheel there. So this appears to be a petrol engine. The unique bit is this weird element which is sticking out the side of the crankcase. Heaven knows what that is. If we just scroll across to the expanded picture, where was it? There it is, down there. This is the zoom in view of that weird object that's stuck outside the crankcase, and it looks like the crankcase, the crank itself comes in here. It looks like it operates some kind of gear wheel here, but what this is all about, I have absolutely no idea. So there's obviously no sign of the bike having any kind of installation for a battery or an electric motor here. So I really don't think that the explanations online are correct. I think we've got the wrong end of the stick somewhere. But I have absolutely no idea what we're looking at. So if anybody has any idea about what this is, as I say, it's Yamaha, and you'll find this story on Ride Apart and on Visor Down. I'd be more than happy to hear what you have to say about it, because it baffles me. Right, okay, so let's head for the in-depth item today. Now, This is based on a story I wrote years and years and years ago, actually. I wrote an article called How Much Power Do You Need? And I pointed out that if you want to ride at a steady 60 miles per hour, which is the limit on a single carriageway road in the UK here, all you need is around 10 horsepower. And that basically meant that the bike we were using as a training bike at the time, a CG125, would happily meet your needs. It doesn't matter if you happen to have a 100 horsepower bike, I pointed out. If all you want to do is travel at 60 miles per hour, then your 100-mile per hour machine, your 100 horsepower machine will still only be using 10 horsepower to push the wind to either side and propel you at that steady 60 miles per hour. Now, of course, as soon as you want to ride beyond 60 miles per hour, you're going to need more power, and the numbers then begin to climb rapidly. 30 horsepower gets you to about 100 miles per hour. 60 odd horsepower will see a bike nudging 120 miles per hour. Beyond that, of course, speeds are starting to get seriously silly. You're in license throwing away territory at 120 already. And the only way that you're ever going to unleash your bike's full power output, if you have something like a 150 horsepower bike, is to select a low gear, first gear, in fact, and then rev it through to the red line. Because otherwise, the peak power lives firmly up into license losing territory. And, you're simply not going to be able to use it. Now, I suspect it was one of those articles that I wrote that rather made too much sense to perhaps too many writers, because it got remarkably little in the way of comment at the time. Anyway, just recently, thanks Kevin, I was pointed at a post on the Bennett's Bike Social site from 2018. And Steve Rose asked the exact same "how much horsepower do you really need?" question. Now, essentially, the study recreated a data logging experiment that had been run many years earlier in performance bikes, I think it was, when the journos had all been shocked by just how little power they actually used on a run around their testing route. I can't remember the exact figures, I've got them somewhere, but I believe Emma Franklin completed the lap at road legal speeds and used an average of just 12 horsepower. That's a fraction of the GSXR's peak, of which would be 100 odd horsepower. It was a 600 they used for that. So they all rode the same bike, and I remember that one of the riders actually lapped their TT course, as they called it, in a seriously illegal time, and he still didn't get anywhere near peak power. So what happened in this rerun? Well, it was both the same, but it was also subtly different. Instead of sending out 4 different riders on the same machine to see how much each rider used on a circular run, they took 4 different machines, all of which put out around 100 horsepower, and then got just one rider to do the 4 runs. And they picked someone they called a racer and a stunt rider who was more likely to use more throttle than we were. And here's what they found. Quote, "The results were fascinating. The XJR 1300 was the only bike to use more than 70 horsepower, peaking at 89 brake horsepower, but only for about 10 seconds in the 48 minutes it took to complete the route. The Pan-European had the highest average power used figure at 43.8 brake horsepower, and the GSXR 600, being ridden by a fast racer, averaged just 29 brake horsepower and never got above 50 horsepower once." The article concluded, and again I quote, "The boffins explained what happens very clearly. On the road, you use your throttle and therefore power to accelerate up to a certain speed and then back off, holding a steady throttle to maintain that speed. It needs a certain amount of power to achieve that speed, but once there, you only need a whiff of throttle to overcome the airflow and maintain momentum. Arrive at a corner and you need to slow down. Once through the corner, you accelerate up to speed again." And they said, The reason our heavy tourer used almost twice as much power as the sports bike is because at every corner on our very twisty route, it had to slow down more because it was heavy and handled much worse, and consequently then had to accelerate harder to get back up to speed, which used more power. And of course, something their boffin didn't tell them is the tourer has more mass too, which all has to be accelerated up to speed. But if you're one of those riders who still believes 150 horsepower is the minimum you need for touring, and that was patiently explained to me just recently by a rider who was buying a big KTM twin, maybe it is time to think again in terms of horsepower and torque. I'll be coming back to this topic in a week's time, actually, when I look at the role of the gearbox, and I'll examine some of the surprises that were in store for their fast racer out on this loop. Right, okay, that's it. It's time to wrap up the show. But obviously, before I go, if you want to keep me producing these shows and to help yourself with some splendid reading content, do pop into my coffee shop. Now, that is it for today. Thanks to everybody who's looked in live. Thanks to those who will look in on catch up. You have been watching me, Kevin Williams, of Survival Skills Rider Training. This has been Elevenses, and make a date to join me for the next show for another roundup of news, views, and biking tips. And if you are out there on your bike today, make sure that you enjoy the ride and stay shiny side up, and then I will see you next time.